So thank you so much. Warm welcome to all of you. I'm hoping everyone's, more or less everyone's getting vaccinated and better prepared to take on. Do any one of you have an echo from my audio? I got one feedback as I started speaking.
Not me, Ritu. I'm hearing you good.
No, not.
Perfect.
No.
Okay, so let's carry on. So I think I'm just okay, good. I'm hoping everybody's staying safe. Everyone's getting vaccinated slowly, and I think we probably will have to make peace with this virus. Various studies are saying that this virus is going to be there pretty much quite active in our lives till 2027 or 2030 as well. So of course, with diminishing impact, with diminishing casualties, hopefully, if vaccines start to work, if vaccine starts to improve. But having said that, I guess we have to move on, and we have to get on with ensuring that there is business recovery. And the catastrophic effect of the pandemic has been felt across many economies. Some economies who were expected to be more resilient probably than others have also borne the brunt of it, have affected countries with various levels of GDP and per capita income. So we are seeing emerging employment. Like yesterday itself, I was in a conference which was supported by ILO, and I think the data that they shared is quite grim, to say. And hence, it's all the more important to ensure that businesses come back to its own rhythm, and we get on with our lives. And hence today's conference, I mean, we've been having since the last 17 months, every Tuesday, a webinar on how we are going to be putting India back to work. But today's one is essentially focused, much more targeted on what's happening, what are the trends. Now that people are coming back to office, what are the realities that we need to be prepared with? So I'm joined today by a very exciting set of panelists. We have amongst us Sandeep. Sandeep actually is Vice President Workforce Management with Microland. We have Anurag. I know Anurag for a very long time. He is Vice President HR with Unifor. Rasagna, who's Director HR for Poland. These are people that thankfully I've had relationship with, I think most of you, and I know the good work that you're doing in your respective organizations. So we will lean on you today for your expertise. But before that, today's format is going to be such where we will give you a little bit of perspective of what's changing in workplaces and what's affecting those changes. Yes, next slide, please. So I think there are various kinds of transitions which have been accelerated across businesses, whether it's in terms of our business strategy, how we are dealing with our customers, how are we managing our workforce, operations, finance, technology. I think there is not a single function which has been left unimpacted because of this accident called the pandemic. And I think it's good to pause and remind ourselves that over the last 100 years, the propensity of such accidents, which has such impact, have actually increased. We may not have seen something like the pandemic before, but we have been seeing there is a growing frequency of such incidents happening, and hence it augurs well for us to make peace with the fact that we live in a world where we will be taken on by surprise, by unknown factors, by unseen factors, by very invisible foes out there. I mean, gone are the days where we are fighting visible enemies and countries and God knows what else, and beliefs and all of that. This is a whole new ballgame altogether. So obviously businesses are trying as much as possible to reduce uncertainty and figure out how can they build a business which can sustain in spite of the accidents. How do you sense early if there are potential challenges that are going to emerge in the environment, and how quickly can they respond? Also, some of the basic presumptions on which businesses were made and created and ideas were floated needs a reset. I think customer behavior pattern obviously has changed. I mean, there was a time where people would go out to buy, now they don't want to buy. I mean, I know that there was a time when people used to smirk at you if you're buying clothes online. And suddenly, overnight, that has become a reality. There are many structural changes that are going to happen in terms of buying decisions, infrastructure around customers and their decision making points, and of course, online buying. Workforce is, we need to know how to, we need to figure out how you're going to organize themselves. How are you going to manage their performance? How are you going to manage their productivity? Because all the givens on which you were basing some of these decisions have been rattled and have been shuffled. So how are you going to look at it going forward? And I think one thing pandemic has taught us is the importance of agile strategies to respond to exigencies, especially to do with manpower. Like for us as a company, we were 100% work from office business in every possible way. I don't think as a company we could, once in a while, if people fall sick or family members sick, they could work from home, but it was not really a given for us. But then we saw ourselves in probably a week or 10 days move the entire infrastructure to a remote working environment. So I think it's important to understand how agile we are. Operations, people are working remotely, and hence the only way forward is empowering teams. It's very clear that there is a balance that needs to be maintained between getting transactions done and still sustaining and investing in human relationships. And of course, about how do we ensure that even when there is disruptions, we stay resilient and carry on performing. From finance perspective, risk has become important like never before. I think risk was always important for companies, but I think the factors influencing risk has changed today. How do we leverage technology? How do we improve and processes to ensure that higher performance is critical? May I request whoever is on unmute to please put yourself on mute? Thanks so much. And technology, I mean, now technology is not really an industry. Technology is a way of life. Technology is basic operating system for every business to enable better decision making, to enhance productivity, even look at growth channels maybe. And amidst all of this, I think there has been tremendous upsides for staffing per se. Organizations have started looking at staffing organizations and companies to improve their resilience and improve their agility. They have understood that in amidst all the uncertainty, especially when it comes to extended workforce management, scattered workforce management, this becomes just the kind of hybrid solution that they need to ensure business continuity, yet be able to respond to any changes that are happening in any territory, in any business at any point of time. The muscle of somebody or organizations who have got the scale, reach, also the flexibility to be able to support them in times like this have come to the fore. The ability of managing operations and executions or dealing with resources. Like for us in TeamD's, we are right now having our associates are deployed in more than 6,600 locations in India. There is still a long way to go, I think, in terms of overall penetration. But the fact that there are now, you can rely on a staffing company or an agency who can support you across the length and breadth, who understand the regulatory nuances and who's also is keeping themselves abreast with the changes that are happening becomes important. The ability to manage the incumbents or the candidates or the associates, their grievances, the ability to tap and reach out to them, and what kind of networks and relationships that one has invested in becomes important. We are seeing that even in, I mean, IT, it's an obvious thing that there is a lot of demand from outsourcing, but we are seeing healthcare, pharma, education, and the likes also becoming more and more keen towards evaluating creative, innovative staffing options. Yes, next, please. So I think the transition to the post-pandemic, I mean, there is a lot that's happening. I'm so sorry. The first data is, uh, no, actually it's correct, right? Perfect. So last quarter everybody has seen the effects of the pandemics, and I don't think the staffing industry was any different. We ourselves have borne the brunt over the last 17 months. I think Q1 of last year was disastrous for the entire staffing industries. And then there, of course, there's been some process and method to recovery. Just this Q1 itself, there has been only a very marginal growth that we have seen. And I think it's pretty much reflects what happened last year as well. Of course, labor codes have been in the forefront. So to ensure that there is optimization, rationalization, reduction in compliance cost, burden, complexity, the multitudes of definitions of different acts, authorities have been reduced. However, it's been on abeyance right now. And what we gather is that I think it can, because of certain feedbacks, challenges, and the second wave, I think it should probably come to light and the rules should become implementable in the next couple of quarters. It's very clear that how do you manage your customers and how you manage your employees are now fundamental. I mean, you can't differentiate between what's fundamental to a business and a priority because it's one and the same at this point. Some of the key changes that we are seeing is that remote recruitment. I mean, I remember during the first wave, we were hiring delivery boys through online video apps. So which were unthinkable at one point of time. There was very little acceptance of that even with many of our customers. But right now, that's an accepted way. And suddenly there is an adoption, which we did not see, by the way, before the pandemic, which I think is a great outcome. There are almost 91% uptake as per certain reports in terms of video-based hirings. Analytics is key now for decision-making, not just for business, even in HR. And I think there are more and more affordable options emerging for organizations. I mean, analytics once upon a time used to be something that was accessible to the mid or large size companies, but it's become much more democratized right now. And more companies are using this and leveraging this today. Reskill is given. I think a study that we recently did on learning losses and upskilling opportunities, there are employees who've come forth and said that they felt that in spite of the pandemic, they created options for themselves just on account of the efforts on upskilling, while others may not have been so lucky. So I think upskilling is given. I think omni-channel staffing platforms, whether it's how much digital tools you're using to meet your staffing requirements, how much creativity in terms of the models that you're trying to leverage, it's emerging. And of course, automation. Automation used to be a favorite topic in conferences before the pandemic, but for the first time, we are actually seeing that organizations are adopting this as a way of life. And it doesn't matter whether you're a tech company or not. Thanks so much. Move to the next slide, please. So we've been doing a series of LinkedIn surveys, by the way, and especially to understand the mood in terms of the transitions that are happening in workplace policies. So one question which we asked was that what might post-COVID vaccination related workplace policies for workforce look like? And interestingly, 38% of them saying that cannot come into office. About 33% actually says that they believe, 33% are saying cannot come to office. Almost 38% believe that there'll be no change in policies. About 13% believe might lose their job. And almost 16% believe that this is a time when they are not likely to get any new job offers. So these are some interesting things. And I'm of course gonna come back to a panelist to also take their views on some of these surveys, results, and outcomes. But let's move on to the next survey question. So I think one of the questions that we asked is that, is vaccination critical for return to normal? And what are organizations' approach towards it? So we've also been able to segregate responses we've received from senior management, employees, and non-management response. And we noticed that almost 48% feel that if you're not vaccinated, you cannot come to office amidst the management response. Almost 43% believe that there will be no change in any kind of policies. We'll see how that goes for them. 33% from the non-management response sides believe that they will not be able to come to office without vaccination, or they may not be allowed to come to office without vaccination. Almost 30% feel that they might lose their job. Almost 16% believe that there'll be no change in policies, and a large number of people believe that they will not be getting any new job offers during this phase. Yes, next one, please. So this is just an analysis in terms of function-wise, the view on vaccination policies. And I think this study, of course, needs to refine further, but I think this is an interesting trend that we are observing functionally as well. I mean, this actually tells you that which are the functions which are more amenable to probably working from office as against the others, and vice versa. Yeah, move on. So now that I've given you a certain context of what we are trying to discuss today, I would like to invite Sandeep in to throw some light on the challenges faced in workforce management, technology development and adoptions. Also, if you could share some insights on the impact of COVID on workforce management technologies, and what do you think workforce management technology will look 10 years from now? So Sandeep, over to you.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Rituparna, for setting up the context so nicely. So when the storm comes, that point in time, you realize, the strength of the ship and, the material what was used to make a ship. So right now we are under storm as an IT industry, and this is what is going to separate the organizations which have got very strong foundation, which are structured, which have got very strong processes, policies, and systems, versus the organizations who are not having these, right? Where the foundation is not so strong, the functions are not cohesive, and they don't know how to work together, and there is a confusion on the policy process, and the systems are not robust. The systems are not ready for the digital businesses to happen. So this is what is actually separating the companies which are succeeding during this pandemic and companies which are trying to survive in the pandemic. So this is the difference. And a big part of this, managing the storm goes back to our basics in terms of how you are managing people, how well they are performing, how they are utilized, how well they are being productive, working from home, all those very, very basic things. So I'll talk about what kind of challenges we are facing, and then what has been the impact of COVID on workforce management related technologies, because as you see, most of the people are working from home. So definitely we need to enable that, right? So when I move to the, I think you need to move to the next slide. Yeah. When I go to the challenges, what we are facing in working, with a remote workforce in the IT industry, a few things stand out here. First is that we need to be staying connected with remote workforce, for which you need technology enablers. You need to be having pulse of the people. You need to know what are their challenges, how to solve those challenges, and you need to enable them with various kind of apps, various kind of dashboards, various kind of things. So that is the first and foremost thing. Second is what we have seen, that the recruitment is remote. The whole process of recruitment is happening digitally, which we never thought earlier, that without seeing a candidate, you will be able to make offer, you will be able to make the person join, and you will be trusting whatever you are seeing, right? So that has changed a lot. So remote recruitment and also remote exits, where people are leaving the organization. There are farewell parties which are happening. There is a offboarding process which is happening online, and all these things are happening. People are sitting in various locations in India, and they are able to join and they are able to exit. So that is also happening remotely. Move to next, please. Yeah. And how do we manage onboarding? How do you get the infrastructure? How do you get the logistics done? How do you train people remotely when they are joining the organization? How do you, provide all those sessions online? How do you deploy them? because when people are joining remotely, the first uncertainty is, knowing the manager, knowing the team, and being able on the day one, being productive on day one. So completely online has been a big challenge. Go to next, please. Then again, when people are getting offboarded from various projects, the time between the projects, as we popularly call bench period, how do we manage the bench period? When people are sitting in the office, you see them, you understand their challenges, their strengths, you can very well leverage their strengths during the period between two projects. But how do we manage that when people are sitting at home and they do not have a proper project assigned to them? So how do we manage the bench period? How do we ensure that people are productive during that period? How do we plan for their redeployment? How do we plan for their transition into new projects? Those have been big challenges that workforce management as a function has been facing. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. And then productivity, ensuring right kind of utilization, because when people are working from home, it's not like people are sitting in the office continuously and they are sitting with that to collaborate and to deliver, right? They are sitting alone, and then they might be collaborating in using various tools online, and they may be talking to each other. But how do you ensure that productivity is measured properly, and also we are ensuring the right utilization? We have seen a lot of customers, particularly the global customers from Europe, US, they have been asking these questions. So people are working from home. How are you ensuring that productivity is getting managed? I am getting the same kind of throughput what I was getting before the pandemic. So how do you ensure that? How do you measure the utilization? How are you tracking the utilization? Are there different ways of doing it, or is it same? So that has been a big challenge in the industry. Go to next, please. And then how you are complying with the information security and privacy policy. So we have seen a lot of, particularly the customers in the in the banking sector, insurance sector, healthcare sector, they have been very, very paranoid about the data privacy, the information security, all that. And they have been asking questions around how are you managing my privacy and information security when people are working from home? How are you ensuring that my information is not getting downloaded and put on some internet and all that? So those have been a lot of concerns which have been coming from clients, which has been a very important aspect of managing the workforce. Although I know this doesn't fall strictly into HR and workforce management domain, but policies definitely fall into it. So that is the reason workforce management has been linked to it. Next, please. So how are we dealing with these challenges? So challenges are enormous, and how workforce management as a function has been dealing with these challenges, particularly using technologies. And on the back of technology, we have to have strong policies and processes. So let's talk about each of them. So staying connected with remote workforce, we have seen, various organizations which never thought that they will need a way to track the attendance on app and on the work from home situations in the systems. They have been doing that remotely now. So there is a login, log out, which happens on the app, on the portals in the organization where people are doing it. There is more rigor on the timesheet management because customers are asking questions. How are you measuring productivity of people? How are you ensuring that they are delivering? Suppose you are on a time and materials project, you are charging me for 8 hours a day. How are you ensuring that I'm getting that delivery output of 8 hours a day? Then we have collaboration tool, agile meetings. So no day goes without having a meeting on either Microsoft Teams or Zoom. So that is something which is something which team is still learning. So a lot of us have been used to it, working for many years in the management. But the young people from the college, how to be productive there, how to collaborate well, because they have been used to getting mentored in person. How do we do that remotely? So that has been a big challenge. And then another thing very important for the workforce management and HR together is how do we ensure the well-being of people? How do we bring it in the apps? How do we ensure that we know how many people are well, what do we need to do about them? SOS calls from them, from their families, and then creating the war rooms of CEOs, COs, HR, to ensure that nobody is stuck in a in the global context in any city, any country, not able to fly out, not knowing what to do. So those kind of problems we have been resolving in the war rooms, where we take care of the immigration, travel, healthcare in a remote corner of the world, work out all our work out with all our network in the global context and ensure that people are well and taken care in various parts of the world. Let's move to next, please. Yeah. Remote recruitment exits. I already talked about the online recruitment platforms, assessments, video assessments. And that brings me to one challenge which we have been facing on the fake candidates, online evaluation. How do we take care of those challenges? How do you ensure that if you have 3 rounds of evaluation, the same person is appearing in all the 3 rounds and the same person is joining you as well, right? Online evaluation. These have been some of the things. So we have found out ways to use digital solutions to do that, doing the screen capture, ensuring that there is a match between various kind of proctored, unproctored assessments, and also ensuring that we have online exits. We have the challenges of infant mortality, higher loss challenges in terms of people getting selected, not joining. How do we manage that using technology? How do you ensure that there is a connect which is happening from time to time? There are automatic alerts, triggers being sent to various managers to connect with people, to ensure that these periodic checks, the pulse check of the people who are getting onboarded in future, that is also getting done. So a lot of technology led solutions have been there on these. Let's move to next, please. Onboarding, training, deployment. We need to be having, for onboarding, one very important aspect has been the IT infrastructure. How do we ensure that IT infrastructure is ready? We have got right kind of infrastructure and we are ready to ship before the person comes on board. How do we have the right kind of training program? So now the classroom training, which used to happen for 4 hours, 8 hours, 2 days, 3 days, those trainings are becoming less and less preferred by people. They need to have the bit size and bite size e-learning. There has to be video based learning. There has to be assessment driven training to ensure the effectiveness of the training. So we have got certain trainings which prompt users who are the learners to answer some of the questions, every 2 slides, every 3 slides that happens. If it's a presentation based training, if it's an instructor led training, there are quizzes which happen at the interim and then quizzes which happen at the end to ensure the effectiveness of training. Ensuring the effectiveness of remote training has become more and more important during this remote learning. And HR interventions on the, can you just go back to previous, please? HR interventions on well-being, managing stress, work-life balance has also been very important. And we have been running a lot of workshops with people, how to ensure the work-life balance, how to ensure that your stress is taken care, and then you should have ability to disconnect also when you want to. So all those things we have been doing remotely using technology. Go to next, please. Next, please. Yeah. And I talked about bench period, which is the uncertain period of people between the projects. How do you ensure that you are forecasting the bench in the system well in advance? How do you know that you are able to get the right kind of visibility into people coming to bench and take care of those cases in advance itself? Because once a person is remote, in a remote location, and person comes on bench and person practically doesn't have any manager to report to, that's the time when people start feeling uncertain. They may start applying for other jobs. So how do you use technology to enable that kind of interaction between people, having the right kind of systems, process, as well as the touch points to ensure that people on bench are also taking care. They are being deployed into some useful interventions in terms of initiatives, building the POCs, building the solutions, doing the crowdsourcing projects with them. And then how do you ensure that they have got the readiness to join the next project? How do you ensure that you have got the right kind of dashboard to manage those transitions from bench to project? How do you ensure that those transitions are planned in advance? You have got the readiness of those people. So all those things can be done digitally very well, provided you have got the right kind of visibility in advance. You have the right dashboards, right kind of trigger alerts, where you are checking that some person has been on bench for 15 days, 30 days. You are taking care of those cases automatically. Measuring productivity, I think this is one very big focus area on which my last 2 organizations, the current organization Mycoland and the last organization ITC Infotech, both the organizations have put a lot of focus on measuring the productivity, ensuring that People have been delivering what they are supposed to deliver even during pandemic. There has not been any productivity loss. And when we collect the metrics, there has been lot of data to prove that the productivity has either remained same or improved in most of the projects, with certain projects where only we have seen a small amount of drop, which needed more and more personal interaction, where we had more interaction which was required to be done in the client place. Except for those specific examples, everywhere else we have seen either it has remained same or it has improved. And a lot of analytics dashboard we have built to measure the productivity, to ensure that we are able to capture that at the right point in time, and measuring the utilization correlation with the P&L statements of the units, ensuring that we are having right kind of dashboards, mobile apps for capturing the timesheet, capturing the utilization, lot of focus on the personal utilization. So what used to happen earlier is we were measuring the utilization at organization level, unit level, and project level. Now we are measuring at individual level and ensuring that that is taken care properly during the work from home situation. Next, please. Complying with IT security policies, privacy policy, that has been very important. Conducting online trainings, ensuring the automated checks implemented in the systems. So that I already talked about it. So let's move to next. Yeah, so what have been tech imperatives, what we see of these WFM trends, and what we are going to see in the next 10 years. So IT world is a 4D world, as we call now. So digital already given, everybody knows. It's a distributed world where teams are not in the same place, clients are not in the same place. It's all distributed across geographies, across cities. It's diverse because there are various kind of requirements coming, and people have to learn more than one technology, more than one skill. And then they need to be deep also. So that's a that's a challenge, right? Knowing where various technologies, being say full stack developer, and also knowing deep in a technology. So that is the 4D world now, right? Go to next, please. So these are the changes what we are seeing in the current situation and in the next 10 years. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. So we have a blurring of temp and permanent workers, because now the challenge what we are seeing is that people are working from various locations and they may not join you permanently. They may join for a time period. And then there is a blurring of the temporary workers, permanent workers. We used to have only 2 categories earlier. Now we are seeing that there are 4 or 5 categories coming. The fixed time workers, the people who may not be in your payroll, who might be working with a contractor. Then there are companies which are taking the projects from you, and they are delivering those projects. So various kind of combinations of temp and permanent workers are coming, which may lead to the changes in the policies, systems, managing all that, right? So that is the technical imperative of that. Move to next, please. Then proliferation of roles, skills, and proficiencies, combination of the JDs. People have to be multi-skilled. There has to be a lot of analytics to be available. What all technologies person knows with what proficiency, whether the person is at 3 on 5 on that proficiency, 5 on 5 on those proficiency. Since people are not sitting next to you, this becomes very, very important to ensure that right people are allocated to right projects and all the data is available. There has to be a lot of focus on matching the JD versus the profile of the person and using AI ML related technology for that. Move to next, please. Then matrix organization, people may be working in 2 projects, people may be reporting to 2 managers. How do you manage their assignments, utilization? How do you have the apps which tell you that this person is utilized here, so he has bandwidth available for say remaining 50%, 40%? How do you manage all that at runtime? So this has become very, very important on continuous basis. Next, please. Reduction of the project lifecycle durations. You see most of the projects getting executed, particularly in the development side, using agile method, on particularly infrastructure side, using shared services. So how do you ensure that you have continuous tracking of those projects and ensuring that there is enough focus on faster turnaround, delivering on day-to-day basis, measuring the SLA, people joining with a self-induction, KT, on-demand learning and assessments and all that. Next, please. And then higher level of IT readiness in the incoming workforce, particularly freshers. So earlier freshers used to come and sit, in the trainings for 3 months to 6 months and then become deployable. Now we are seeing those windows are shrinking. So how do you create self-learning modules, virtual labs, certifications, assessments to ensure that people become productive faster than they were becoming earlier, particularly freshers? Next, please. So in conclusion, we need to plan, we need to be ready, and we need to embrace these changes and then succeed. So this is where I think we have to focus on. We cannot avoid the changes, but the changes are coming, and we need to ensure that we are ready for those and then succeeding in managing those. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So we'll never have 100% available, 100% suitable workforce. So that's the reason we exist as workforce management function. And we need to ensure that we learn from this 4D world challenges and we deliver. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandeep. So will you transition the slides?
Yes, Ritu. So we request Mr. Verma to take over, Vice President HR from Uniphore, and share his thoughts on learnings from COVID businesses. Over to you, Mr. Verma.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. And great to connect on this pertinent topic with eminent speakers. Ritu has been a great colleague and a professional friend for so long. And as Sandeep was speaking and Ritu started the key note address, I think worldwide there has been a lot of change and adaptations during this period of pandemic. Nobody is sure when this would get over, but one thing is certain, that things will not remain the same, and already businesses are adapting through it. I will be just focusing on few pointers on each of these, because if you look at these topics which have been put for discussion, for me are really very deep rooted, right? And we can go a lot in depth in each one of them. What I'm talking is basically my understanding post interactions with different people, not only in India but in my current role with my global counterparts, and how the trend has been. So speaking first around the trend of competition in the new business, e-commerce, or all commerce is now electronic or e-commerce as we call it, because most of the time of this early start of the pandemic, everything was virtual, and businesses had to adapt, flex, and gain competitive advantage in this new trend. So the first and foremost and the biggest thing that is coming worldwide is that the future of the sales, be it conventional, be it e-commerce, would be driven by mobile platform. And why it would be, the data itself talks about that the worldwide mobile retail revenue just in 2021 is expected to reach to $3.5 trillion against a 2.5 trillion in 2020. So it's a significant jump which businesses are seeing worldwide using the mobile platform. Now this may sound simpler by the ease of use. When we look at the mobile platform, everything is on a smartphone device, and websites are accessible from mobiles in a lighter version or apps, and we can safely say that it is the businesses are prepared to succeed. While if you dive deeper and look at the reality, it's that only 12% of the consumers worldwide find mobile commerce convenient, which means that for all businesses to stay ahead of the curve and then sort of gain advantage on it, there is a big significant room for improvement. Now from an HR perspective, from a people perspective, what does this mean is that a lot of people who are not skilled or having not gained skills on how to go digital and mobile in their respective fields of work, this is a big opportunity. because not only the convenience would be from the tech persons who would do the coding, but also each of the other function need to be mobile platform ready in terms of at least how they can make the processes convenient and easy for a technology experts to make that convenience from a customer or a consumer angle on a mobile platform. The second important trend that is coming is the customization of products would go highly personal. Reason being, people are at home, they're at the convenience of mobile, and the one who is ahead of the curve in either e-commerce or related business would be which gives a unique personal experience to each individuals, right? So the developments that you would see on the UI UX interfaces, the digital platforms of products to give the look, feel, and make it more personal to you, and also a lot of empowering of customers to become partners on product creation process is already happening, and we'll see a lot of traction in the year itself and way forward. And this would largely impact the customer satisfactions, their loyalty, and also yield higher profits. So again, a big scope for people to look at building careers where they can do personalization of content, the product, and the whole look, feel of it to make it more unique and more personal to the customers. The third big thing which all are talking about and it's most commonly used is the augmented and the virtual realities. This is gaining more and more adaptation in all platforms, and e-commerce is no difference in that. The use of virtual or augmented reality is important when it comes to products like furniture, home appliances, for that matter fashion and clothing, wherein how a person can see a look and feel in their environment, right? In their living room, in their they have to just take a picture or a video of their living room, and that it converts into the product, like a television or a furniture, how it would look like, and that would change dramatically the way people will shop and then use the products more and adapt to this technology. Now this use of technology and adaptation in the market is projected to have more than 3 billion users by 2023 in a forward projection, if you want to look at. So big opportunity for people to sort of upskill themselves, make their career choices in augmented and virtual reality space. The next big one, which we all are experiencing, but still a lot of work is happening globally, is the voice search. Speech technology is helping consumers to get comfortable while to the convenience of speaking in their own language, and then sort of interacting on the mobile platform to do shopping, to solve their queries, and also to interact with the customer service executive. Now this voice shopping is predicted to grow around 40 billion, my bad, by 2022. So again, a huge scope of people working in this domain. Last but not the least, video is the in thing. More and more vlogs where we see across, the video reviews are there, plus the product videos on e-commerce sites and in general are gaining more traction. and it's almost predicted by 95% of video marketers that the video helps the buyers understand their product offering, and also has a direct impact on the sales. Also, it makes easy for us to share it on social media and gain opinions from our friends and then people who matter across. So I think these are the critical ones, wherein the industries, the individuals can focus on upskilling themselves and be ahead of the curve and beat the competition, be it in a conventional industry. But for e-commerce, almost essential that they build on deeper expertise on each of these areas. Coming to how competition has reduced in terms of how technology has helped them gain that winning advantage. If you see today, the organizations which took a larger approach, or a global approach as we call it in true sense of market selling, or even being local in e-commerce but looking at a more wider range of offerings, are the people who have won or reduced the competition during this phase. And we have seen multiple startups gaining into unicorns even early of this year, and many more coming in. Now, the reason why startups gain and are disruptive vis-a-vis the traditional players is simple, that they just have and utilize the access to knowledge and skills which can be easily translated and replicated across geographies, or looking at a global landscape, as compared to the conventional industries where the change and adaptation takes a little longer time, just because how they are structured. And some of the larger organizations did make these changes in their design, wherein they had small squad teams who would sort of work on these. I think the right platform of data and technology, those who were able to choose those fast, gain a competitive advantage, like a local street seller, getting hooked across into the online platforms of B2B, and then we saw unicorns coming in those areas in India as well, and the bigger ones also getting into that mode, had immensely gained on business during this time. Also building an augmented workforce strategy in a right combination of which jobs can be leveraged through technology, and wherein the other set of people can focus on being more productive and gaining more productive advantage. But the biggest one has been the ability to think of business running in a different way, and embracing the change faster, that this is going to be permanent, and how we can flex and adapt. A pertinent example comes to my mind is one of the travel and tourism company, which while the whole pandemic was seeing a big slowdown on the business, they were fast enough to adopt in giving a virtual off-site experiences to the corporates, wherein people at their home could have theme-based virtual travel and off-site experience, and totally build across a new business line, and gained a huge competitive advantage. Lastly, coming to how traditional businesses would fare in the tech-led world, I would say, again, the same basic principles would adopt that. There were millions of small-sized businesses across the country who faced challenges during the coronavirus shutdown, and still are trying to recover from the global slowdown of the economy. But there are still some good number of small time players who managed to stay afloat, who were the early adapters and found newer and creative ways to change their operating model. So the key to success here would be adapt early, think creative, upskill both your people and your technology, and look at alternate ways on how you could gain competitive advantage during this pandemic. Some of the areas to watch out for growth, which would be disruptive post pandemic. One is definitely mobility, connected and transportation, and that too sustainable. We all are seeing the fuel prices going on, and electric is the word. Particularly the 2 and 3 watt EV ecosystems would see a massive opportunity of growth both in manufacturing and sales retail segment, and we are already seeing electric two-wheeler and three-wheeler industry gaining a huge traction there. Also, the advanced cell chemistries is one area wherein India would and should definitely take an advantage. This industry is gonna grow up to $300 billion by 2030, and if we take lead on this, and government already has made some good policies around to support this industry, this would be another breakthrough area. And last but not the least, artificial intelligence is gonna be there, and almost 8 out of the 10 tech oriented companies need a good and ahead of the curve artificial intelligence or data science specialist, and India has a big opportunity here to sort of reorient our academics, upskill our people to meet these requirements. So the closing note from my side would be: embrace the change, adapt early, upskill yourself, and be ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verma. That was quite insightful. So we plan to extend the webinar by a few minutes, given the crucial insight that we have happened to garner from our two speakers till now. So now requesting Mr. Prayaga to take over the dais and run us through the importance of formalization, especially for building post-COVID resilience and how things are going to change for all businesses. Over to you, Mr. Prayaga.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Can we move on to the next slide?
Now, before you pop in, I would request anybody, the panel attendees, if you have any questions, please start posting it on the Q&A tab. We are running short of time, so we'd like to be as zippy as possible on that tab. Thank you. Over to you, Rasagna.
Thanks, Ritu. Yeah. So I think where the problem lied and what this entire pandemic crisis has put businesses, anyone and everyone, especially the traditional businesses. I thought this is my view of it. Now, what you see on top is irrespective of the size, irrespective of the legacy values one enterprise carries, everybody has gone through that. Now, call it production downtimes, very rapidly changing consumer behaviors, supply and transport and logistics, complete breakdowns, workforce constraints because people have actually migrated away. Of course, cash crunches. All these problems, whether you're big or small, whether you're advanced or traditional, so to call, across sectors, every one of us felt that. I think, and that was the rapid pulse that we were seeing. Additionally, what the formal traditional enterprises had to also take the burden of is they might not have the wherewithal and the might of large boards, senior executives who can actually come together and plan, because your traditional businesses, because you're probably medium or small scale enterprises, and because you're traditionally run. So the gestation for you to even wake up to the reality was so short, you could never plan even on the smallest of things. Being traditional, you might not have had as high a digital appetite as some other larger corporations might have had. Innovation quotient, again, as a result of several other things, might not have been. You wouldn't, like I've said, you wouldn't have a very strong presence of leaders who are multidimensional and who are resilient, who are in tune with realities. And of course, like the far more powerful enterprises, you might not have had a lot of bargaining power in circumstances like this, because whatever piece of cake was available, a lot of bigger companies were eyeing for the same share. So I think collectively what the traditional businesses have gone through is a lot more than the businesses that are actually far more advanced. So adding to the woes that you see traditionally because of breakdown in a lot of elements of business, your leadership, your power at the table to bargain with different vendors and parties, your lack of a digital system, your probably not so tight disaster recoveries and business continuity plans. All of this has actually put a massive strain on traditional businesses. And this is a summary. Now, as if we can move to the next slide, I thought a synopsis of the entire breakdown can be summarized here. Now, this is taken from a study. And what's interesting is, as an extension to the point that I'm making, you will see that the entire line, right from planning to sales, at every single point, every business felt the earth shaking. Now, if you're a formal enterprise, that much more, but you can clearly see right from planning in terms of difficulties in supply planning, shortage of critical parts and components, rapid changes in scaling down, scaling up, warehousing, storage facilities, you name it. You can actually close your eyes and name all potential problems one business can actually face. And most businesses have to go through all of that. And the formal businesses, which are traditional businesses, would have faced them in a lot heavier magnitude than the other companies. So it's not limited to one portion of the business. And as some of them have said, what we are seeing currently is probably after 1870s, the biggest hit that the global economy has taken ever. And India is an economy, enterprises in India and more formal enterprises need not be mentioned. We're still reeling with the after effects. Now, whether you call it impact on our economy, impact on our top lines as organizations, impact on the workforce as such, we are still reeling. So I thought this is a summary to very crisply say what are all the possible problems all of us are going through. Now, if we can move to the next slide, there are some formal businesses, slightly old-fashioned businesses, which have still tried to defy the odds. But when any one of us actually takes a couple of steps back and look at what are progressive organizations done, what are all the organizations, irrespective of the domain, size, scale, spread, what are the common traits in organizations that have tried to defy the odds? Clearly for me, these are a few things that they've stuck their guns to. One, strengthening the core, focusing on the core, because you might have a lot of peripheral services that you've added over the course of your business as it progressed, but they've realized what we need to focus is on our strengths and not actually be all over the place. So a lot of them took a position of default, strengthening on their core, focusing on their core, as a principle, as a matter of principle. Secondly, I've seen in my own capacity as a part of an organization that works very closely with clients as much as vendors, and I'm sure Ritu and my other co-panelists, everybody, whoever we work with in our partner system, so to say, the clients are not looking for answers from anyone, because the clients are in the same boat as us. So I think that organizations, enterprises that have survived or that are managing to survive are the ones that are authentic, that go to the table and say, let's figure out the answers together. I think clients are looking for co-creators and not necessarily people that will come with answers, because all of us realize this is not something that there is a guide for where we refer and then go and suggest to the clients. So the authenticity, the agility to actually scan and sit along with the customers across the table, or vendors for that matter, and say, how do we collectively go through this? I think that's the other behavior of enterprises that defied the odds. A lot of enterprises, again, that have won the over the odds, have taken this time to look inward. What I mean to look inward is look closely at, are our processes very efficient? Is our cash management very solid? Are we taking care of our employees from a wellness, welfare angle? Do we have a digital twin where we are not completely wiped out and there are no traces? So they're looking at multiple angles to say, have we actually covered our bases well? Because you might be lost if you don't have that view, but necessarily scanning the environment, because what you're missing is that this time has also taught us to actually press pause on a lot of things. It's not that there is of course a lot happening on the negative end, but it is also said half of it has to do with our own internal preparedness. So the organizations that have come out above, kept their heads above the water, are the ones that looked inward very, very rigorously. And lastly, the organizations that have been reasonably successful or continue to be are the ones that are actively seeking partnerships and leveraging the ecosystems. Now, it's only to a limited extent that you can travel alone. Now, especially irrespective of who you are. Now, we can name very large technology companies. We can name staffing companies. We can name supply chain and logistics and warehousing companies who have actually shaken hands with certain partners in the ecosystems, which are out of the routine. And that is because collectively, probably your strength and my strength is much more than 1 + 1. And through the last 1 year, there's a lot of published info on companies shaking hands to leverage common ecosystems or feeding off each other. So I think as behaviors, these are the 4 standout behaviors for me, whether one is a formal enterprise or otherwise, which have led for organizations to stay afloat positively. Let's move on. The third piece. Now, before I go to what do I think will help moving us forward, I just thought there is enough research and there's enough wisdom around this. There are a lot of research that, however, the interesting part is, now I've taken 3 bits, one from Capgemini, the other from the World Economic Forum and Mercer, and then on the next slide, we've got some other study. All of them actually bring us back onto 4 or 5 common themes. Which is around the entire world of work as we know is changing, and 3-dimensionally, the work in itself, the workplace, and the workforce. But they're also talking about, are organizations stressing enough on contingency planning? Is there a localization? Is there a lot of diversification? Is there a view of sustainability? Is there visibility into practices? Not only of us, as an enterprise, are we being transparent and putting it out there? But are we, as a rule, as a thumb rule, seeking from our vendors that they be visible and they be transparent to us? Do we know what are the risks? Have we institutionalized a mechanism to evaluate the risks and plan business continuity and disaster recovery? Now, these are all the common themes that are emerging. Please, if you can move on to the next slide. This is the third part. Oh, there you go. That's the third this thing. Now you can see the focus on workforce safety, wellness, how it's increased in the last 2 years. Same with customer retention, cost management. I've spoken about operational efficiencies. You can see there cost management, cash flow management, agility, digital transformation. These seem to be the spokes that will actually strengthen the way forward for organizations. So from all this wisdom, and conclusively, what I can say, if we can go to the next slide, is what's the name of the game? So what do enterprises do, especially the more formal, large front field workers can do, is these 4 things. How are we leveraging technology? Now, this technology could be, and it's not always, it comes in one size and one shape, but have we looked at places where we can simplify? Have we looked at places where we can automate? Have we looked at places where we are sitting on tremendous power of data, but are not crunching and making and deriving analytics out of it? So what are the possible avenues to lean on to technology and transform our business and make it more agile? because if we do not, if digital is not the posture that we are by default embracing, then it might break our back. So one dimension for organizations to move forward, like I've said, the formal organizations, is now to lean on to technology more than ever. Secondly, of course, workplace, I think Sandeep had said, will never go back to becoming what it was in any form that we can imagine. Now, there's a recent study, Cushman and Wakefield study, which says about 75% odd people of respondents have said they see forever organizations offering remote or flexi working options. So the 10 to 6, 10 to 7 every day, 5 days of the week, going back to office, that infrastructure, etc., is gone out of the place. Now that's about the workplace. The work in itself should be reimagined. But more importantly, let me spend a few seconds on the workforce. I think Ritu also spoke about, and so did a couple of others, on repurposing our people, making reskilling and investing in that. That's an absolute necessity. But what I also think most organizations are missing out on is, are we actually looking at the entire possibilities of where potential workforce can come from? For example, let's ballpark our employable workforce around I don't know, 500 million workers. Ritu and others are far better at these numbers. But let's, for a simple fact, see only about less than 5%, about 2 to 3% of that entire population is into gig space. Now, potentially, in the next 3 years, more than 50% of new roles, jobs that come, ideally are supposed to be coming in the gig space. So which means from where we are to where we should go in the next 2-3 years, have we thought of rearranging work, breaking it down so that we can take advantage of the gig workers that may come mainstream in the next 2-3 years? That's an important imperative. Now, let's also see another very interesting study I came across thanks to this seminar prep, is apparently only about 2% of applications that in the formal sector every day that apply jobs actually get jobs. Now, look at the abysmal rates of people getting jobs in the organized sector. So hence, the unorganized sector, it's very high time that we look at that sector very seriously and strengthen that so that more jobs are catered. Now, purely due to homophobia and transphobia, there's a third statistic that really startled me. Apparently, we lose about 1.7, 1.8% of our GDP. Now, imagine adult population about 6% ballpark is supposed to be belonging to this set of population. As workplaces, are we ready to tap into them? They are ready to work for us, but are we ready to actually get them into the main work streams? So I think these are some of the things I thought all of us as enterprises, small, big, progressive, formal, traditional, should open our eyes up to and say, we've got far more potential out there in the market. Rather than saying my workers have migrated who have been with me for 10 years, can we open our eyes to the reality that there are a lot of new categories, potential categories that we have never even thought of. And that's the way I think to go. Thirdly, operational prudence. I spoke about this, but in particular, cash flow, liquidity management, new product development, new markets. As an enterprise, are we agile enough? These are some things that I think organizations have to focus on. And lastly, it is on the go innovation. And it is not that we are taking long quarters to incubate an idea and then to do, but I think rapid prototyping, opportunity sensing on the move, and how do we adapt to it? Now, some call it agility in as many words as we can call it. I think, are we on the go? Is our foot on the ball? And are our eyes set on what's happening around us? I think these are the 4 strong pillars, especially more so important for formal traditional enterprises, so that you come out strongly and we see you on the other end of the pandemic. That's all that I've got. Thanks, and Mike, back to you.
Thank you very much. Sincere apologies from my side for grossly underestimating the potential of our panelists today. And hence, is there a summary slide, guys? So, well, I'm not going to spend too much time because I think this has been well articulated. Rather, I probably would just go right into some of the questions. And for all those of you who've raised those questions, some of your questions are probably my own questions, so I shall take the liberty of paraphrasing some of them. So one question which I have, and I think whoever amongst the three of you would like to respond to that, please go ahead with it. My question has always been that while we've been talking about the fact that workplace will completely change and remote work is here to stay, what happens to collaboration? What happens to teamwork? What happens to social capital? What happens to co-creation? All of that, can it happen remotely? And you know, and the fact that the most often talked phrase today is human touch. And also somewhere I see that people are assigning that responsibility of human touch in what's going on as an HR prerogative or an HR responsibility. So I really need your thoughts. Look, I went mad working from home. And the moment they announced that lockdown is over in Bangalore and you can work from office, I was back in office. But is it like, this is a question that has been there in my mind, that what do you think actually will happen? What happens to human mind and emotions with the changes that are happening in the current, in the workforce?
I'll try to give a shot at it, Ritu, and probably others can add. I see the infrastructure, the physical buildings, and what you're referring to as workplaces, workspaces, more to build camaraderie, more to celebrate, more to come together, and really establish every now and then a sense of team, probably share a pizza and then discuss. It's not a place where, like always, it will continue to remain for endless meetings and work at the desks, etc. I see workplaces itself as exactly for the reasons that you've called out, spaces dedicated to do all of that, to come together, to share some quick ideas, to probably celebrate more actually, and to collaborate and stock take and then disperse and then connect virtually and then move on. Number one. You also touched upon a very fascinating thing where you said HR probably driving all that. I think if you see any very progressive organization, the leaders you will see not only being operational leaders, but being people leaders. They are the ones who are walking the talk. They are the ones who are actually driving the change management. They are the ones who are communicating actively. And HR is a facilitator and a counselor or an advisor as to how do we go about doing that. The organizations that don't realize this and where leaders are assuming that's not their job, or only HR people have to elevate that quotient of whatever software aspects it is, they are the ones who are in a pitfall. That's the second thing. I think I'll pause here. These are the two things that I can very confidently think would happen in response to the question.
I don't know, you or Sandeep, any one of you want to respond to that question?
No, I think earlier what used to happen is there were, two paradigms in HR which were going on, in various industries. One was that, we need to be high tech. That is one, one school of thought said, because everybody is moving to HR analytics, mobile and all that, we should all move there, right? Second was high touch. We need to talk to more people. Millennials like to be talked to, all those kind of things. Now both have merged actually. We need to be high tech as well as high touch together. So the millennials and the new generation is very, very tech savvy, and they are able to interact more easily on the platforms and on the mobile and all that than any of us would have done in our 20 to 30 years of service. So I think both of them have to merge, and it's not either or. We have to know people, we have to interact with them on the devices, as well as we have to come together maybe once a week or maybe 2 to 3 times a month and come together and celebrate being a team together. So I think both are important.
Well, I lost two things through the pandemic. I lost my eyesight and I lost my mind. Just to put things in perspective. Yes. So, Anurag, do you have some thoughts on that? Or should I
Yeah,
keep-
definitely. I think both Pragya's and Sandeep's points are pertinent, but and yours as well. I think we all want to be at workplaces, and there would be opportunities where people would come and work together or celebrate together, as people were saying. But my own experience with my current organization is that we have global teams. Now, there are managers sitting in North America having teams in Europe, India, and Israel. Now, even if you want to meet once in a quarter, that's challenging to get all into one workplace, right? And the time zone differences are there. So one big change which people managers need to do, not even the leaders, is how would you maintain the same connect as you do face to face. So it's more about embracing that change and making that change in yourself and making those genuine effort to have that virtual connect of a coffee. It's hard. I would say it is not so easy, but people have made that change of getting into that connect and not getting into transaction. But what happens usually in a online connect, we just want to get directly into the agenda of the meeting, right? And not even checking on how you are doing. Like in normal, you would connect across, you will talk about weather, sports, politics, etc. That doesn't happen naturally on a virtual platform, and that's where I think the people manager needs to be coached. And the role of HR, what I'm looking at in such organizations which are having global workforces even during pandemic, is more of becoming a people coach. In terms of the tools would be there, they would be trained on that, but you would need to give them personalized one-on-one coaching to them, that how do you as an individual have to flex yourself and adapt and make that change. And that's a big change. It would be a long journey. It is not easy because humans are not meant, and no way the this this model would gonna stay. Totally agree with all of you that that once in a while connect, whatever it may be, 3 months, 6 months, to get together to collaborate, celebrate, is much needed. But yeah, virtual is another new thing that we need to embrace and adapt as technology.
I think one of the questions which I was probably expecting already is that with the changes that are around us, while India has seen a lot the emergence of the gig workforce, especially for some frontline lower skill jobs, whether it's whether it's paper delivery model or the speaking of the tomato.
Ritu, your voice is cracking up.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
It's better now.
Yeah. So do you guys think that this resurgence of gig will also happen now in more specialized roles or in higher caliber roles or roles which need more experience? So what's your sense? And this is typically in India context that I would probably like to ask.
Yeah, I can start with taking that, and others can chime in. I think the in West it was there that people were taking up multiple opportunities at the same time, and then being as a specialized consultant, right? And the flavor of working with different problems simultaneously is where they were finding it more comfortable. Conventionally in India and Asia, people still like to have a secure job, and not try out different things. But what the trend is now changing is with the convenience of working from home, and also people understanding and appreciating that even in a very organized sector, you never know how your job is not secure the next day because of something totally disruptive happening. And that's where people are more open these days to the concept of doing more, being present at more places, and utilizing their time as per their space. So I think the gig, or the option to choose your work and your times of work, and how much time you would like to give, is gonna be the new in thing worldwide, and lot more opportunities and platforms will get created on that.
Just to add to that, Ritu, I think what, especially the technology companies, and I think Sandeep will bail me out on this, large technology companies, all of the blue chip companies, others, you will see what they've been doing over the last 3-4 years is internally, they've already started that at project managerial levels. They've already strayed from waterfall models and heavier hierarchies. They've made a move into more gig sort of a thing, where now a project manager is not dedicated to an account or to a client for the next 3 years, which typically used to happen a decade or more back. Now he or she is expected to manage parallelly, sometimes 2 or 3 projects or clients, and act as a shared resource. So within the organizations, to your question, at lower levels, no doubt. And like I've said, it is expected that in the next 3 years, about 56% of the new jobs will be in the gig space. In India, I'm talking about it. But to your question, which is pertinent to mid and senior levels, will they go there? I think we are far from it. It will take time, and I don't think, my personal opinion, we will see it in the next 1 year happen. However, inwardly looking, a lot of organizations have now realized, and back to the point where I said work itself has to be redesigned. They have realized it's not a sustainable model to have a very modular project structure and heavier investments unless we actually share those resources. So gig in that sense at mid and senior levels has started. Now it is, I'm also seeing that not only in technology companies, but probably in companies like ours, which is more in retail execution, FMCG space. We are also telling a project managerial and senior leadership to take ownership of multiple accounts, and that way gigs are happening. Outwardly, I think there is still time at those levels.
Yeah, I'll just try to add, to that from IT industry perspective. So what we have seen in IT industry also, the mid to senior level people, they need to be multi-skilled, and maybe, sometimes they need to be domain deep or function deep, right? So like, one typical role which we have created in Microland is, transition manager. So earlier transition manager used to be very specific.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but tell me one thing, isn't that a contradiction? You're saying multi-skilled and domain focused and deep. Is there no tension?
I'll just tell you what I mean by that is, okay. So we found that every engagement which we are starting in this work from home situation is getting into risk, or starting with the risk itself, right, of transition and all that, wherever we are taking over the large engagements from other vendors. So we created a specialized role, which is, say, transition manager role. And at any point in time, you will have, typically 4 to 5 large engagements, which might be going through transitions. Some may be in the areas of, say, network management, other may be in the areas of development, one may be in areas of completely different cloud deployment, right? The transition manager's job is to ensure that all the transitions are taken care, the logistics is taken care, the team members are there, the resources are there, and the KT is happening between the vendor and us. So that's a very specialized job. So the person has very specialized function called transition management, but the work can be in different skill sets, right? In the development, in the infrastructure management, cloud management, and all that. So while person has to be multi-skilled, has to understand all the areas of work, all the service lines, but the person is very specialized to manage transition endless, end to end, without having any problem there. So those are the specialization along with multi-skilling coming. So that's how I think some of these roles will evolve over a period of time by learning. We saw the transition as a big problem, so we sorted it out, right?
Perfect. So one last question. I think I have never ever in my last 17 months been grossly so out of time. So last question, which I have to ask before we pause today, would be that, do you think that more and more companies will insist on employees getting vaccinated? One is existing employees, that you all need to be vaccinated. And the second is that where your being vaccinated can become one of the hiring criteria, because I've already read reports of some of this happening in US, Europe, and UK too. So your thoughts on this?
And it is happening in India too, actually.
It's happening.
Uh, I mean, yeah, some technology companies have said by this date, you need to be vaccinated double dose and ready. Then we will call you back as per our plans. So it is happening in India. And I think in a fair sense, Ritu, you will agree, so will everybody. The known way of fight against this pandemic is vaccination. So I think it's only natural for us to lean on to that option unless some other option springs. And for mitigating risk on yourself and others. So wherever, even workspaces as they come back to hybrids and you're probably going in 2 days a week, it's imperative that, and it's only natural for organizations to stress on that. And most of the organizations, you will also know, have said we will reimburse wherever there are costs. And on the other hand, I know of organizations which said, still left it as a choice. However, saying, in which case every fortnightly, you got to take the RT-PCR tests and say you're all safe. And I think it's just a safety protocols in an environment that we're living in the hard truth. But I think you will see a lot of them as employers actually stressing on this and requiring that as a mandate.
Let's say there is two candidates, they're equal in every measure, and one is vaccinated and one is by the way, it's come down to this level, right?
Yeah,
It would come down. It would come down.
Sure.
It would come down.
So, which one would get the job?
The one who's vaccinated would have a higher chance.
One fully vaccinated, the backup is at least one round vaccinated, reject is no vaccinated at all.
I think it's also, it's also about people,
I will try to ensure that the person is vaccinated before the person joins, because in a lot of cases we just don't have a choice.
See, if you realize, Ritu, just there's a common practice that you've liked the guy, but the person doesn't have a particular certificate or the background check, etc.
Yeah.
You keep him on the back burner and say, we'll give you 3 weeks after joining, but do this. So I also think that we might actually do that, especially in a remote scenario. We might still want to onboard the guy, but tell the person that, you know what, in the next 2 weeks or 1 week, the first dose and then subsequently this thing. And that's a condition for continuing the employment. That's another way to look at it.
Well, as I add into it, I was coming to that it's also about how the other colleagues will feel safe in working in an environment where people are not vaccinated. So it would become like a background verification check, that the offer letters would say that this is subject to you getting vaccinated over a period of this time if you are already not, and if you're done, you share across your certificate. That time would be given, because till that time a person can be on a remote working mode, but for them to be fully employed, I think this would become mandatory. My interactions with people in America as well, where in the county's government has said that you're not required to wear mask if you're vaccinated. But when we did a survey and I interacted with people, they said that I would not like to come back to a workplace where I get to know that the other colleague is not vaccinated, even though we are wearing masks. So such is the trend in those developed sectors. So I think places like India, etc., where still there is a huge gap to cover, it will be rather mandated than given a choice sooner or later.
Yeah, I think I feel so too that this is what's going to end up happening, and let's see how this goes. Of course, it's about dependent on availability of vaccine, because that's another typical excuse that we are hearing from many corners. We're grossly out of time. While I would love to talk about many other things today, but your time is precious, and hence I'm not going to keep you this call. But this is what's missing. All circumstances, I would have been sharing a cup of coffee with you. But, so catch up with one-on-one whenever possible. Because I'm hoping that such discussions and deliberation. Sometimes, we just end up learning through hearing each other and their thoughts, and that's more than enough
Truly.
in current circumstances. This is the diversity also that we need, right? Rasagna, we were talking about that we are so fed information, we really don't have choice.
Absolutely.
But some of these discussions actually help you enable that choice where, yeah, this is what I would like to talk and discuss. And so thank you so much for all your time and precious time to be part of this. And thanks to all the attendees and participants patiently hearing us out. And apologies again for 30 minutes override. Hopefully we'll make up for it next time.
Thanks, Ritu, and everyone.
Thanks a lot,
for having me
Ritu.
over.